Last week, we talked about something super important, which was how to get past the overwhelm that so many small business owners, solopreneurs feel when it comes to content marketing. I've been there. Even as a content marketer myself, I've struggled at times with staying consistent with my content because it's a lot. You've got a lot of things that you're juggling. But I shared in last week's episode my 5-step plan for how to create a content marketing plan that's actually sustainable, actually something that you can stay consistent with, and really removes that overwhelm in a big way. This week, we are going to be building on that and talking about how to fuel that content marketing plan by repurposing content. And that's where you create basically one essential piece of content, and then you create smaller pieces of content that stem from that one core piece of content. But if you've never done this before, it's not necessarily the most intuitive thing. And so I wanted to go through my process today and talk you through how to do this for your own business. And if you listened to the episode 2 weeks ago with Sarah Noel Block about podcasting and how starting a podcast can be a really impactful way to bring in new clients, reach new audiences, and really grow your business, this episode and last week's episode really built on that to give you some key ideas on how to create this system. So let's get into it. This is a juicy episode. It's not going to be a super long one, but it's going to be chock full of helpful details. So stay tuned. Hey there, beautiful human. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, a content marketing, branding, and web design expert and founder of Honey Be Bold. This show is all about helping you build the most successful and fulfilling business possible so you can make a bigger impact in the world. Let's dive in. Before we dive into the meat of today's episode, I wanted to tell you about a workshop that I've got coming up because it ties into everything we're going to be talking about today and what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. This workshop is 1 month of content in 1 hour. It's going to be a really interactive workshop, and we're going to be working together on planning out a month of content in just 1 hour together. Yes, that is really possible. It's really something that you can do, and this is going to ease your overwhelm in such a big way. The workshop is going to be on April 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern. The link to sign up is in the show notes. So go sign up, grab your seat. Seats are limited, so I definitely want you to get a seat, and I'd love to see you there. All right, now let's get into the meat of the episode. Step 1, you're going to start with a core piece of content. What is a core piece of content? This is a pillar content piece, the thing that you spend the most time and energy on, the thing that is going to tie back to your business goals, is going to really help grow your brand. A pillar content piece or a core content piece, whatever you want to call it, it can be a YouTube video, it can be your email newsletter or a Substack if you don't have an email newsletter. It can be a LinkedIn newsletter, or it can be a podcast episode, right? So that ties back to my conversation with Sarah Noel Block. And I'm going to be using a podcast episode as my key example throughout this episode because that's my core content. That's my pillar content. This podcast that you're listening to right now is my core content. That's what all of my content is based around. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. But your core content doesn't have to be a podcast. It can be whatever format feels right for you. That's something we talked about in last week's episode, right? It's really about finding one longer form content type that you can draw from to build a content machine. It's really about finding the format that feels best to you. If you love writing, then blogging or a LinkedIn newsletter or an email newsletter might be the way to go. If you love being on video, then a YouTube show might be the way to go. And if you love talking like I do, then a podcast might be the way to go. And you don't have to pick one or the other. There is a universe in which you can have more than one core piece of content. But I think that for most people listening to this episode, you're looking for the quick and easy wins, right? You don't have time to be creating a whole content machine. That's actually a challenge that I faced when I first launched this podcast. I bit off more than I could chew, as I sometimes do. And I had this whole plan, right? I was going to have a podcast episode and a blog post and 2 email newsletters a week. And I don't even remember what else was on the list, but I was going to have all the things. And surprise, surprise, I was only able to keep that up for a month before I felt like I was going to explode from overwhelm, and it just wasn't happening. So I pared things back and I said, you know what? I'm going to focus on my podcast. That is what I want to grow. That is what I want to focus on. That's where I want to put my energy. It is a much easier lift for me. Even though producing a podcast is a lot of work, it's just easier for me to flip on the mic and talk into the camera and just go for it than it is for me to sit down and write a blog post. Even though I am a writer, at my core, I'm a writer, but in some ways that makes me overthink my writing, and I just don't have time for that. So I would love to eventually get back to blogging more. But for now, my podcast is a perfect core piece of content. Because again, what you want with a core piece of content is that you want something that doesn't feel super overwhelming and stressful. Find the thing that you actually enjoy making and that doesn't feel like a ton of work. And that's the thing that you want to focus on. So that's step 1. Find your core piece of content. Step 2, you're going to break this down for social media. So once you have your pillar content, you want to break it into bite-sized social media posts. We're going to go over to our good old friend ChatGPT or Claude or whatever platform you use for AI. If you are not using AI, you're making your life so much harder than it needs to be. So don't be afraid to use it. The key is that you've created this core piece of content that is your voice, your expertise, something that your audience can really learn from. And that is what you're feeding into your AI tool of choice. I use ChatGPT. That's my preferred tool, but it doesn't really matter what tool you use. And you're feeding that core piece into ChatGPT and asking it to help you repurpose that content. So you can repurpose that content any which way you like. Let's say you want to have a LinkedIn newsletter that goes along with your podcast. Great. So ask ChatGPT to create you a LinkedIn newsletter. A LinkedIn newsletter is going to be longer form as well, but it's repackaging the content that's in your podcast or blog post or whatever it is and creating that in a new format that is optimized for LinkedIn. You can ask it to create you an email newsletter that is going to go out to your list. You can ask it to create 5 different Instagram posts from that one core piece of content. You can ask it to create 5 LinkedIn posts or Facebook posts or whatever it is that you want to create. Now, how do you decide on what you should be creating? Well, the key, like we talked about last week, is that you need to be posting in the places that are most likely to reach your ideal clients. And also the places that you like hanging out. If you hate Instagram, like with a passion, and you do not want to touch the app, you don't have to. It's okay. You don't have to go on Instagram. If your audience is hanging out on LinkedIn and you prefer LinkedIn, focus on that. Don't ask ChatGPT to make you Instagram posts if you don't want to be posting on there. Because again, ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you use is going to be creating the starting point for each of these platforms. It's not going to give you a polished, ready to share post. You're going to need to edit it and make sure that it fits your audience and fits the platforms that you're sharing it on. So if, for instance, you ask ChatGPT to suggest a carousel post, right? Pulling out the key points from your core piece of content and creating a carousel post from it for Instagram. Well, now you need to actually go and create that carousel post in Canva or wherever it is that you create your carousel post. If that's not something that you want to be doing, well, then you shouldn't do it, right? I'm not saying that across the board. For instance, if your ideal clients are hanging out on Instagram and you just hate being on there, you might need to be posting on there anyway, because you need to be hanging out in the places where your ideal clients are hanging out. But if you don't need to be posting there and you don't like posting there, then I would just take it off the list. So that's step 2. So step 1, you're creating this core piece of content. Step 2, you are going to ChatGPT or to your AI tool of choice, and you are asking it for specific pieces of content that you can repurpose from that. Step 3 is that you are customizing all of those pieces for each platform. So you want to make sure that you're hitting the right format and the right tone for each platform. You're giving your audience what they're looking for on that platform. So as an example, Instagram and TikTok are both highly video driven, right? And they're short video driven. There have been some changes to that in the last few months, but that's still largely the case. Largely, people are engaging with short form videos on these platforms. They want just short, engaging content that they can consume quickly. LinkedIn is much more about thought leadership and storytelling, and video is doing better on LinkedIn, but straight text posts still do well. And text with photos still do well, especially if those posts are driven by storytelling and really demonstrating yourself as a thought leader. If you have an email list that you are sending emails out to regularly, which I hope you do, I hope you have that, email allows you to get more personal and in-depth than social media. It can really be a newsletter that people are looking forward to opening from you and reading from you. And that's really what we're looking for in an email newsletter. So it's important to adjust the format, tone, and style for each platform instead of, copy pasting everything. This is a common mistake that I see, is that people are strapped for time. So what do? They just say, oh, I'll just post exactly what I posted on Instagram onto my LinkedIn page. You'll notice I'm not really talking about Facebook so much because honestly, it's not the platform where most people are engaging in page-driven content. Where Facebook comes in is that it's much more about group engagement, right? People are going on Facebook to go to specialized communities for particular things that they're interested in. And so it's a great way to engage with potential customers if you're hanging out in the communities where they're hanging out, but it's not necessarily the place where you're going to be focusing on posting content. You can set up your Instagram page to just automatically post to Facebook. My personal opinion, some people may give me some hate for this, but my personal opinion is that's totally fine. I wouldn't worry about that too much. But for other platforms, it is really important to be posting the things that people are specifically looking for on those platforms in the ways that they like to consume content on those platforms. And so what are some examples of this? Let's say create a reel or a TikTok video or a YouTube short. Those kind of have a lot of similarities. Obviously, all platforms are trying to do this short form video. You can just take a 30-second key insight or quote from your core piece of content and create a reel or a YouTube short from that. If you feel like engaging in trends, you can also see what are some ways that you can tie a trend into some key insights from that core piece of content. Carousel posts work really well on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can just, again, ask ChatGPT to summarize 3 to 5 key takeaways from your core piece of content and create a carousel post from that. For your email newsletter, you can expand on one key takeaway and just make it really personal. Tell a story that's related to that. So instead of planning out new content every day, you can create that one core piece of content and then the other pieces of content really emerge from that very naturally. Step 4, I think that's the step we're up to. Pretty sure. You want to automate and streamline this process. You should not be posting manually every day and worrying about how you're going to post things when you need to post them. You don't have time for that, girl. I don't have time for that. So we want to make sure that we're using as many automation tools as we can. Again, ChatGPT is great for helping with this process, for turning your content into captions and summaries and different repurposing ideas. I think in the episode with Sarah, we talked a lot about different tools that can be used for editing video and audio clips. If you are doing a podcast or a YouTube video or something like that, you can use tools like Descript or CapCut to edit your clips. For graphics, you can use a tool like Canva. There's no shame in using Canva to work off their templates and create carousels or other graphics, testimonials, whatever it is that you want to create. It's okay to use templates that exist. And then you can use social media scheduling tools like Later, Metricool, Planoly. There's so many of these tools now. It's really a matter of just finding what fits with your budget and what you're looking for, how big your team is, all of that. But use scheduling tools because it really does make a huge difference. Content marketing should not be taking up all of your time. If it is, you've got a problem. And the more you automate, the more you can free up time for running your business, like actually doing the thing that you want to do. So my advice is to block out 1 or 2 hours per week and batch and repurpose your content instead of scrambling daily. And maybe it'll take more than a couple hours in the beginning, right? Maybe it'll take half a day. In the episode with Sarah, she talks about her process of spending 4 hours every Monday morning on creating her content for the week. And that might be what you need. It really depends on what your core piece of content is, right? If your core piece of content isn't as labor intensive, then it might not take as long. Again, producing a podcast is a lot of work, but it's really about finding the rhythm that's going to work for you. And once you get into that rhythm, it can get pretty quick. You can start producing this content really quickly and without a ton of stress. If you've got it down to a science where you know exactly what to ask ChatGPT for, you know exactly what pieces of content you need, you know exactly where you're posting it, you know exactly what scheduling tools you're using or what templates you're using, it gets quicker and quicker and quicker, and it's really, really manageable. So how do I do this? So I mentioned my podcast is my core content. It's my pillar piece of content. So as an example, basically what I do is I record the podcast, I edit it. My producer does the final edit. And while she's doing that, or once it's done, I take the transcript, I drop it in ChatGPT, and I say, all right, here are the pieces of content that I need following these templates. I give it the templates and I tell it what I need. By now, I've trained ChatGPT pretty well. So it knows who my audience is. It knows what I sell. It knows what my goals are, and it knows my voice and tone. Now, again, when I get something from ChatGPT, it is not polished. It is not something that I'm just going to post as is. Very rarely do I get something that I'm like, oh, that's pretty close. It is getting closer, I would say, but I always have to do some work to it. But it doesn't take a lot of time, and it takes so much of that stress off my plate. I will tell you the show notes for my podcast episodes are pretty close to what I get from ChatGPT. It really does make a huge difference. And it's not something that I need to spend as much effort getting just right, because the show notes serve a specific purpose, which is like people need the information that they need. It doesn't need to be my best prose. Whereas my LinkedIn posts have to be really personal. My emails have to be really personal and really leaning into that storytelling element. So that's not something that I can trust ChatGPT with, but I get a base to work off of. So that's how I do this. It's really made a huge difference. Now, I have to share that, as I mentioned, I have struggled with staying consistent with my own content. And most of last year, actually, I completely dropped the ball on my content marketing. I was really busy with client work and really busy trying to just keep my head afloat, honestly. And then all my leads dried up. That's what happens when you're not putting effort into making yourself visible. You're going to have a really hard time staying top of mind for people. And when you're not actively investing in that, it does have negative impacts. That's just the reality. There's a reason that I do content marketing for my clients, because it works. I'm now seeing firsthand that it really works, because I've been investing in my content marketing in a big way the last few months, especially since the end of last year. I've been following this method that I've shared with you. I'm not making this up. I'm not just throwing some ideas out at you. This is actually what I'm doing to make my life easier. And I've been staying consistent. And as a result, I'm seeing so much momentum in my business in a way that I had not seen before. I'm getting people reaching out to me almost every day. I get a notification from my Calendly almost every day that there's a new sales call on my calendar. And this is coming to me instead of me reaching out to other people. I am also doing outreach because that's also important. And maybe I'll talk about that in another episode. But the inbound leads are only happening because I'm being super consistent with my content marketing and staying super visible. So to recap, these 4 steps, you want to start with a core piece of content. You want to use ChatGPT to repurpose that content into new pieces of content, and then customize those for each platform's unique style, and then make sure that you're using tools and batching for efficiency. And this is exactly how you can make the content marketing plan that we talked about last week much more sustainable. Now, if you're listening to this episode and you're saying, well, that's a nice idea, but I don't know how I can do that myself, come to my workshop on April 30th, 1 month of content in 1 hour, and we are going to map out your content for a full month, and you're going to see that it is totally doable with the right guidance. I'm going to talk you through my own templates that I follow, my own prompts that I follow with ChatGPT, and how I create a content marketing plan that I can stay consistent with in as little time as possible. The link is in the show notes, so go sign up. I can't wait to see you there. All right, beautiful human, that's it for today's show. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmukalele. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. And if you can take 5 seconds to rate and review us, it really helps the show grow. And before you go, if you're struggling to attract and convert your dream clients, be sure to check out my free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, and you'll get personalized feedback from me on how to nail your messaging every time. Head on over to honeybebold.com/free. That's honeybebold.com/FREE to sign up. Thanks for listening.